designed to talk about life's issues from a biblical perspective. I'm Desiree Frazier. Did you know, according to the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, 40 million adults struggle with anxiety. That's 18% of the population. It's treatable, but only about 40% seek help. Many also suffer from depression in silence at some point in their lives. We're here at Crossroads Counseling Services in Ridgeland, Mississippi to talk about anxiety and depression with an expert in the field of this who is also a Christian. Stephanie Smith-Jefferson is with us. She has a list of initials behind her name for counseling and treating depression and anxiety. She has a BS in biology from Tougaloo College in Mississippi, an MA in marriage and family counseling from Reformed Theological Seminary in Jackson, and a master's in human genetics counseling. Thank you for joining us for It's Time. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Let's start by talking about what is the difference between anxiety and depression.
Okay. A lot of people get those confused because they think of one as associated with the other. But depression is more than just being sad or having grief. Depression is feeling, sometimes people talk about feeling blue and feeling low. But there are a lot of symptoms that go along with depression. The feeling sometimes of hopelessness. Feeling sad, you can have some appetite issues, whether it's increased appetite or decreased appetite. You can have some what we call somatic symptoms, some physical pains and things that go along with depression. You've probably seen on television where there are signs that people talk about some of the medicines and can be used for some of the other complaints that depression hurts. Some of the other things about depression is that people kind of move kind of slowly. You don't enjoy the things that you used to enjoy in life. And so there's kind of a stillness, a quietness, and people will say there's a flat affect. The people are kind of dull sometimes. Those are some of the primary symptoms of depression. Anxiety, on the other hand, is kind of the opposite of that in a way. With people with depression, there's kind of that slowness. With anxiety, it's kind of an increase in things. There's not that dull kind of flat effect that you have with
There's
depression.
more energy?
More energy, but sometimes even with that energy, it's not the kind of energy you think like a Energizer Bunny kind of thing. But you can have a little bit more energy than you do with depression.
So we're talking about anxiety now as opposed to depression.
Okay. So it's the opposite. Sometimes you think of depression. One of the things you find with people with anxiety is that it's not the slowness that you find with people with depression or that flat affect. It's more of a hyper, but not to the point of being like manic or whatever. But there's a little bit more energy. You don't see that kind of flat kind of affect in people with anxiety. There's a lot of worrying about things, a constant worrying about things. Worried about the future, worried about right now, constant worrying. So with people with anxiety, you can also have restlessness. You can also have some sleeping changes with that, as well as with depression. So sometimes people get that confused because you can have some of the same symptoms with both of them.
And then do you lose weight with anxiety versus depression, or with both?
You can with both, depends, because both of them you can have some changes in your eating behaviors, whether you're eating more or eating less. And with anxiety, it's a lot of stress. And so with both of them, you can have some of those changes.
We hear them used almost interchangeably, though. Like they go hand in hand, do they?
Sometimes you can have both. A lot of times there are people, some studies say about 50% of people who have depression may have some anxiety. Well, the thing is that you have to know the difference between the two. And so when there is depression, if there is some heightened sense of worry about something, you have to make sure that it's not just about that one thing, but it's about any and other things, and then look for the other symptoms of anxiety.
Is this across the board? Because now we're hearing so much about anxiety and depression among young adults.
It's happening because young people now are so much into social media. And so everything is out there for everybody to see. And they're also living up to expectations of others. So with social media, it says you have to be this or you should look like this. And so if you don't look like that, or you're not where you should be or where you think you should be based on what's out there in the culture, then a lot of young people have anxiety about this. So they become depressed that I'm not where I should be, I'm not making the money that I should be, I'm not where I should be in my job, my life, I'm not married, all these things.
But these are normal things that people go through over the course of their lifetime.
Yes.
But you're saying that social media intensifies it.
I think so, yes. Mm-hmm.
So how do you begin to deal with that? What do you tell young people?
What I tell young people is that that's that person's life and what they're putting out there. You don't know whether it's the truth or not. So you can only be who God made you to be. So you have to figure out who it is that you are and live your life according to that and what your beliefs are. You can't compare yourself to someone else because there's always going to be, you can always find a deficit when you're comparing yourself to someone else. So be who you are.
How serious can anxiety or depression or both together be?
They can be very serious, especially with depression. There are thoughts and sometimes even attempts of suicide. And so that's very serious. And also the same thing with anxiety. A lot of times with anxiety, there is a racing of heart. People don't know
I've had
what
that.
Yeah.
I've had that.
And sometimes you
can't
don't
calm
know.
down. You
Right.
just feel this rush that comes over you. And it's almost like you start sweating thinking about the issue that you're dealing with.
And that happens, and then there's stress that's involved, and that can wreak havoc on your health as it is with anyone. So it's very serious.
How do you keep people from sinking further into these emotions?
What you do is look at some of the root causes of the depression. Is it something that's situational? Is it because of something that's happened to you in the past? Trauma from something in the past. That can happen with depression and anxiety. So look at what's going on around their life. Look into the family history to see things that are going on there, things going on with family members, people being sick, those kinds of things. So you have to find out what's going on. So there are stressors that are involved, things that happen in a job, things that working at home, things at home, your relationships, all of those things we have to look at.
Are you finding that there are concerns or issues that are more prominent than others in the people that you treat?
Yes. Some of the things, because I'm trained and I'm a certified trauma professional, I'm looking at things that are based on trauma. And so I'm seeing a lot of people with trauma. And
what is trauma?
Trauma is, for most people, when we think about trauma, we think about something major like a car accident or fire or being robbed or things like that. Trauma can be big things or it can be little things. We can have what we call big traumas, which are things like life-threatening experiences, or we can have smaller things that are traumatic to us. And it's based on that person whether or not they think it's a trauma or not.
In the Christian community, we're told to pray, have faith in God, and He will help us through these situations. Do you find that it's hard to get people to come in? And do they feel like somehow they're not exercising their faith to the extent that they should?
Yeah, because we hear if something is going on, you've not prayed enough, you don't have enough faith. You're not doing what you should do. You're not studying the Bible. You're not reading the Bible. You're not spending time with God. All these things people are being told that they're not doing, when in fact some of them are doing all of those things. We know that we are not immune from not having problems just because we are Christian. You know, we've been told that we will have problems. We will have trials and tribulations. So we know that we can have them. Just because we're a Christian doesn't mean that we won't, and we do. So we talk about those things. What is it that you're worried about? What about your relationship with the Lord? How is that going for you? Is there any anxiety there? Because sometimes people have anxiety because of their relationship with the Lord.
Really?
Yeah.
What are their issues that they're having?
Some of the issues that they're having is because they think that there's prescribed thing that you have to do based on what someone else is telling you, or that they don't have enough faith because they're not doing X, Y, and Z, because they're not studying every day or they're not reading the Bible every day, which is what sometimes people tell you, that if you have faith, this is what you're going to do. If you're a person of faith, you're not going to have any slip-ups or anything. So all of those messages that people get about faith, and so they begin to question about their faith.
So from your perspective as a counselor and who has gone through seminary training, what are the corrections that you share with people to give them a healthier way of seeing themselves?
One of the things I like to do is to point out to them there are people in the Bible who underwent anxiety and underwent depression. And we talk about that. So they can see that, even during the times of the Old Testament and times of the New Testament, there were people who went through some of the same things. They're not the same exact thing, because times have changed, but the whole thing about depression and anxiety, they had them. So now we can have it.
And King David.
Yes. Very much so. I mean, look at what happened with him. Here he is. This man is running. He's the king, and he's running from the other king and from Saul, and he's hiding in a cave.
Crying out to God, writing songs.
Yes. And I like to use Psalms 88 and 86 where he said, I'm crying out to you day and night. All my enemies are after me. But when you look at the Psalms, if you look at 88, and then what I tell people to do is read 88 first, then go to 86. Because at the end of 86, there's hope. The message is the same, but at the end of it, there is hope. We talk to them about Elijah, after he finished with Baal and doing all of that. And then despair. There he is sitting at the place underneath this tree, at this place where there's there's famine.
I'm the only one left, Lord. I'm the only one doing your will.
Take me. So he said, take me, kill me, let me die. And so there are others who are saying, let me die. Why am I born? So if that's not depression, or if they're not evident of anxiety, what is?
And when you talk about these things, what do you pull out that they can identify with that seems to help them?
The fact that someone else in biblical times, here are these people that we look at, and they're written about in the Bible, then it shows that they had it. So that means that any of us can have it. When you look at David, he's a king. You would think that there is nothing that he couldn't have. He's a man after God's own heart. So there should be nothing that's bothering him. But that's not the case. Here he is being chased and persecuted.
Do you talk about Job?
Yes. Talk about Job, talk about Moses. We talk about any number of people. Yes.
How much counseling do folks need to begin to get control of anxiety or depression or both?
I never tell anyone we're going to have X number of sessions because I don't know. I don't know what's going on, or something else may come up. Because in the beginning, we're just trying to get to know each other, and I'm getting history from them, and they're getting to know me. And so we're kind of building a rapport, establishing a working relationship. And people don't always come out and tell you everything in the first few sessions.
Drips and drabs.
Drips and drabs. And then sometimes they realize, oh, wait a minute, this may be important. Let me tell you about this. And I was like, okay, so there's another dimension to this, another dynamic that we have to look at.
What does it mean for you to do this type of work? And does it take a toll on you? Because you're listening to other folks' issues and probably some, like you said, some very traumatic experiences.
There are times, and I won't say that I'm immune from not feeling sad, or sometimes when I've worked with children who've been abused, and even some adults who've been severely abused, and the trauma that they have experienced. Sometimes I just get a little sad about that, and not necessarily depressed about it, but sometimes sad about it. But I know that this is my calling. And so in the morning, I'm talking to the Lord about, okay, Here's who I'm seeing. You know who I'm seeing because you know you've sent them to me. So you know what the issues are. At the end of the day, I'm like, okay, Lord, I've done the work today. So please take this away from me. And then I do self-care.
Do you see progress incrementally, or how can you tell that you're making a difference?
I ask them, how do they feel? What do they think? Do they see a difference in them? Because I don't want to say, okay, I see great difference in you, and they're saying, well, I don't see any. So look to see from them, from their perspective, what do you see? How are you feeling? Do you think you're making progress? And then identify some areas in which I think they're making progress. But I want to ask them first.
So when you talk to people initially, when should they really say, I probably really need to see a counselor? Because I think in the beginning, they probably say, no, I probably don't need help. I think I'll be okay. But as time passes, they may see where it's getting worse, it's getting worse, it's getting worse. I got to do something.
You just answered it. As to when they think it's getting worse, that they are not seeing any improvement, nothing that they're doing is working. What they've tried to do, and they've tried this and that, and it's still not working. So they may decide, I probably need some help. And a lot of times family members or friends would say, you may need some professional help.
And a little bit about what folks deal with at different stages of life and when they're more likely to experience anxiety and depression. Is there a time period across your lifetime when you're more likely to experience these episodes?
Studies have shown that between the ages of 18 to 25, there's a great time of depression in younger people. And then you can also find depression a lot in older people who have transitions in life. There are different times in life, as you're talking about, that people have depression. Sometimes for families or like mothers there's a transition where they're becoming the empty nesters. For some, it's a time of joy, and for some, it's a time of depression.
They get depressed?
Yeah, some can.
What's depressing about it?
Because their whole life, this period of time, you've been taking care of these children, and everything is about the children, the family and stuff, and so there's a change. So it's a big change in life, and so that can happen. And as we get older, in my age group, you can find depression in people who are senior citizens.
My mother is 96.
Wow.
And over the course of seeing her age, when I've seen her age, because we haven't always lived in the same city, I've seen episodes of depression and would take her to the doctor and and she would say, no, she's okay. But that there's this depression because she cannot do the things that she used to do, and she wants to remain independent. Because it wasn't until she was 92, I think, that she even admitted that she needed some assistance.
And that happens because you think about it, she's the person who's used to being in control and being independent and taking care of everything and everybody else. And now it's the transition where she can't do all of that, and that someone else has to come in and help. So there's a loss sometimes of control. And so when you've lost control of the things you used to have control over, then you're like, what do I do now?
And what do they do now? What do you tell folks like me who have elderly parents and they're trying to be there for them and they see the changes that they go through emotionally? Sometimes you don't really know what to say.
Well, one of the things you have to do, we went through this with my mother. We wanted her to have as much independence as she could. And when there was a time, when there was an area where you can't cook because there was a problem with sight. So we would work with her about those things. But the things that she could do, let her do those things. Because sometimes we want to come in and swoop in and take over everything. And that overwhelms them. I mean, we get overwhelmed too.
Yes.
And so we have to figure out, okay, what can they do so that we can allow them to do those things that are not going to be harmful to them or anyone else, and then let them have that. And then, okay, let's partner together to do these other things.
Did your mother experience depression?
She would probably say she didn't, but she did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she did.
Yeah. And I have a friend whose mother is in her 90s. My friend, I think, spoiled her as she got older. And now it's hard for her mother to separate from her. She doesn't want her to leave the house. How do you deal with a situation like that where you've poured so much into them and they've come to rely on you so much because you saw them aging and you wanted to be there, and maybe you overcompensated?
Yeah, because now there's a fear. What's going to happen if she leaves? What's going to happen? Can she do this? Can I do this? Or whatever. And you have to tell her, make sure they realize there are things you can still do. Yeah, you may have to say, okay, let's see if I go for 30 minutes, how you do. Then maybe an hour, increments. So you have to see about that.
And going out of town is a stretch.
It's a stretch, right. You may have to go out for dinner for a couple of hours and see how they do. And then increase it to something else. But just abruptly going out of town, that's going to be frightening for most people.
Is there anything that we did not talk about in terms of depression and anxiety and Christian faith that we need to point out to folks?
Well, I think that most of us think that we're not having enough faith, or we're not exercising enough faith when we have these things to come up. That's not necessarily true. If you have depression, it doesn't mean that it's going to be a lifelong thing. If you're having anxiety, it doesn't mean it's going to be a lifelong. It can just also be situational. Then you also have to have a circle of people around you who are going to be supportive of you. Not the naysayers, but people who are going to be supportive. But you don't want someone who's going to handicap you and say, oh, no, you can't do this because you've got depression or whatever. But you have to have people who are supportive and say, okay, great, you were able to get up today and go out for 30 minutes. That was great. Let's see if we can do it again tomorrow. So you have to have people who are encouraging too.
I've heard that friends fall off because no one really wants to hear your problems. They have their own.
Yeah.
And so they kind of back off after a couple of times of you know, going through these emotional battles that they can see. It makes them uncomfortable. So you lose friends.
Yeah, we don't know what to do when people are in this woe is me kind of situation. So, that's when you've got to find some other group, like if there's a support group or something, you have to look at that. And then, when you're talking to your friends, you don't have to always say, oh, I'm so down today and all of that. That's not going to be good for you, the person.
How should you talk? If you say, well, I got to be honest about how I'm feeling, and this is how I'm feeling. If I don't tell you how I feel, then I'm not being honest.
Well, you can be honest without saying, oh, I'm so down, or it's like, today is just not a good day for me. That's a big difference.
And how does someone who cares and wants to be supportive, how do they display that in those circumstances?
What they can say is that, I'm sorry today is not a good day for you, but that doesn't mean that every day is not going to be good for you. Let's pray. Let's think about something we could do to make you feel just a little bit better.
Now, I will tell you, I have met people who, no matter what, the glass is half empty.
Yeah.
And you can be around them and talking to them and trying to be positive. And you leave feeling down because they have just seemed to suck the life out of you in a conversation. Because there's no joy, there's no hope, there's no life. How do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, you've got to guard yourself too. I'm not saying abandon your friends, but you need to be honest with them as well and say, okay, I'm not trying to make things worse for you, but let's find somewhere a happy medium where we can find something that's good to look at, to talk about. Let's find some good in something. Whether we're walking outside and we're feeling the sun, or we're seeing, flowers bloom or something. Let's find something good. It doesn't have to be that we stay there the whole day, but let's find something. Let's try to find something good. And we need to do, all of us need to do that every day, because we're surrounded and bombarded with bad news all the time. So we need to find some good in something.
Well, Stephanie Smith-Jefferson with Crossroads Counseling Services in Ridgeland, Mississippi. This has been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much
You're so
for
welcome.
taking the time to speak with us on It's Time, because it's time to deal with our issues and our challenges in a positive, healthy way, but also keep our eyes on God.
Right. You're right.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome, and thank you.
And thank you for joining us for It's Time.